Hi, welcome to the lesson for chapter 4. You should have some questions in front of you, and let's take a look at those together. Remind you that these comprehension check questions you must answer using complete sentences. Some of you are really struggling to make sure that you give me a complete sentence and an ACE type answer. So whenever you do it, make sure that when you look at the question that's there, that you are then taking the important words from that question and beginning to restate that into your topic sentence. So as we look at number 1, we see what do Mama and Big Ma think is wrong with Cassie at the beginning of the chapter. You want to start out by restating that. Mama and Big Ma think blank is wrong with Cassie at the beginning of the chapter. But then you need to go on. What is really wrong? You also need to cite text details. So you're going to want to take a look as we're reading what makes Mama and Big Ma think that such and such is wrong. And then when we come up with what is really wrong, you need to have the answer for that as well. You have to have some text information, you need to make some inferences, and you need to explain. These answers, there are 2 parts to that. So one detail includes Big Ma and Mama's thoughts, and then what is really happening. So at a minimum 3 sentences, but really I want to see 3 to 5 sentences for each answer. Remember that you can type right on this document and submit that in to Teams, or you can type a Word document. Question 2 asks, what do we find out the Nightmen did that night? What was the reason behind it? So remember at the end of chapter 3, the Nightman had come and Cassie had seen them. Remember the children thought the Nightmen were after them. Is that the case? Number 3, what does TJ do that gets Stacy in trouble at school? And analyze, think about, and explain TJ's behavior when he runs to the Wallace store after school. Why would he choose to run to the Wallace store? Think about that. What have the Logan children been told about the Wallace store? What does that let us know about TJ's character? Number 4, explain the clearing in the middle of the forest. Evaluate Mr. Anderson's tactics. Now, Mr. Anderson is not one of our characters. Mr. Anderson is someone from the past that Big Ma is telling Cassie about when we find out about this clearing as they're walking through there, or that she has told her about. What does Big Ma tell Cassie about as they walk through the forest? And what else does she continue to explain? What is Cassie learning about their land here? And question 5, what do you think Mama is thinking when she asks Mr. Turner if he'll shop somewhere else, if someone will back his credit? I'm going to explain that a little more clearly as we read. So as we get into credit and somebody backing credit, that can be a little confusing. So as we're reading that, I'll explain it a little more clearly. I want to point out part 2. When we are in school with me this week, you will be doing an interactive notebook. We're going to make types of character activity. And then there's a worksheet that goes along with that, which is copied onto the back of this page that you have. But you can't complete that worksheet until you've done the notes. So depending on what day that you have me will determine which day you complete that worksheet. Then you can either take a picture of that worksheet and add it to this assignment, or you can turn it into me in person as long as it's on time. All right, so let's take a look at the beginning of chapter 4, which starts on page 69. Cassie, what's the matter with you, girl? Big Ma asked as she thrust 3 sticks of dried pine into the stove to rekindle the dying morning fire. You sure are taking a sorrowful long time to churn that butter. Nothing, I muttered. Nothing? Big Ma turned and looked directly at me. You've been moping around here for the past week like you got the whooping cough, flu, and measles all put together. I sighed deeply and continued to churn. Big Ma reached out and felt my forehead, then my cheeks. Frowning, she pulled her hand away as Mama entered the kitchen. Mary, feel this child's face. She said, she seem warm to you? Mama cupped my face in her thin hands. You feel sick, Cassie? No. How do you feel? All right, I said, still churning. Mama studied me with the same disturbed look Big Ma wore, and a tiny frown line appeared on her brow. Cassie, she said softly, fixing her dark eyes upon me. Is there something you want to tell me? I was on the verge of blurting out the awful truth about the bus and the men in the night, but then I remembered the pact Stacy had made us all swear to when I had told him, Christopher John and Little Man, about the caravan, and I said instead, no, ma'am, and began to churn again. Abruptly, Mama took hold of the churning stick, her eyes searching mine. As she studied me, she seemed about to ask me something. Then the question faded and she pulled away, lifting the lid of the churn. It looks ready now, she said with a sigh. Dip out the butter like I showed you and wash it down. I'll take care of the milk. I scooped the butter from the churning lid onto a plate and went through the curtain to the small pantry off a kitchen to get the molding dish. It had been placed on a high shelf under several other dishes, and I had to stand on a stool to get it. As I eased it out, Mama and Big Ma spoke softly in worried tones on the other side of the curtain. Something's the matter with that child, Mary. She's not sick, Mama. There's all sorts of sickness. She ain't ate right for going on over a week. She ain't sleeping right neither, restless and murmuring in her sleep all night long. And she won't hardly even go out and play, rather being here helping us. Now you know that ain't like that child. There was a moment's pause. Then Mama whispered so I could hardly hear her. You think? Mama, you think she could have seen? Oh, Lord, no, child, Big Ma exclaimed hastily. I checked in there right after they passed, and she was sound asleep. She couldn't have seen them old devils. The boys neither. Mama sighed. The boys, they're not themselves either. All of them too quiet. Here it is Saturday morning, and they're quiet as church mice. I don't like it, and I can't shake the feeling it's got something to do with Cassie. Without warning, I had lost my balance and with an absurd topple from the knee-high stool crashed upon the floor with the molding dish. Cassie, you hurt? Mama asked, stooping beside me. No, I mumbled, feeling very clumsy and close to tears. I knew that if I let the tears fall, Mama's suspicion that something was wrong would be confirmed, for I never cried about such a silly thing as a fall. In fact, I seldom ever cried. So instead of crying, I jumped up quickly and began to pick up the broken pieces of the dish. So, initially, they are checking Cassie, checking her temperature. Oh, does she feel warm? Is she sick? But they realize she's not sick, but that something else is obviously bothering her. When they start to discuss, they don't come right out and say it. But what do they think that she may have seen? Did she really see it? She did. She saw those men. Big Ma, remember, she came in and checked on her, but Cassie had jumped in under the covers and was pretending to be asleep. And she moaned in her sleep, so it would seem like she's really sleeping, but she wasn't. She had really seen those night men show up. Now, what we have to learn is what the night men were really there for. Was it really because they were after the children? And that's what Cassie is so upset about, because she thinks the night men are after them. They made a pact, and they can't tell. And when you have a secret like that, it eats away at you. So we have two sides of this. Let's keep reading to find out why the night men were really there. I'm sorry, Mama, I said. That's all right, she said, helping me. When we had swept the chips away with the long field straw broom, she told me, leave the butter, Cassie, and go on in with the boys. But, Mama, I'll do the butter. Now go on, do like I say. I stared up at Mama, wondering if she would ever know what we had done. Then joined the boys who were sitting listlessly around the fire, absently listening to TJ. See, fellows, there's a system to getting out of work, TJ was expounding as I sat down. Just don't be round when it's got to be done. Only thing is, you can't let your folks know that's what you're doing. See, you should do like me. Like this morning when Mama wanted to bring back them scissors she borrowed from Ms. Logan, I ups and volunteers so she don't have to make this long trip down here, she being so busy and all. And naturally, when I got here, y'all wanted me to stay a while and talk to y'all. So what could I do? I couldn't be impolite, could I? And by the time I finally convince y'all I gotta go, all the work will be done at home. TJ chuckled with satisfaction. Yeah, you just have to use the old brain, that's all. He was quiet a moment, expecting some comment on his discourse, but no one said a word. Think about the Logans. Do you think they agree with TJ's way of getting out of work? TJ's eyes roamed the length of the room. Then he admonished, lectured. See, if you was smart like me, Stacy, you'd use the old brain to get the questions on that big test coming up. Just think, they probably just sitting right there in this very room waiting to be discovered. Stacy cast TJ an annoyed look, but did not speak. Y'all sure are a sorry lot this morning, TJ observed. A fellow's just wasting his know-how talking to y'all. Ain't nobody asked you to give it, said Stacy. Well, you don't have to get snippety about it, replied TJ haughtily. Again, silence prevailed. But that would not do for TJ. Say, how about we sneak down to that old Wallace store and learn how to do them new dances? Mama told us not to go down there, Stacy said. You some mama's boy or something? You got to do everything your mama tells. You go on if you wanna, said Stacy quietly, not rising to TJ's bait. But we stay in here. Again, silence. Then TJ said, say, y'all hear the latest about the nightmen? Suddenly, all eyes turned from the fire and riveted themselves upon him. Our faces were eager question marks. We were totally in TJ's power. What about him? Stacy asked, almost evenly. TJ, of course, intended to nurse the moment for as long as he could. You see, when a fella's as smart as me, he gets to know things that other folks don't. Now, this kind of information ain't for the ears of little kids, so I really shouldn't even tell y'all. Then don't, said Stacy with smooth finality, turning back toward the fire as if he cared nothing at all about the nightmen. Taking his cue, I nudged Christopher John, and Christopher John nudged little man, and the three of us forced ourselves to stare into the fire in feigned disinterest. Feigned means they're faking it. Without a captive audience, TJ had to reinterest us by getting to the point. Well, about a week ago, they rode down to Mr. Sam Tatum's place, you know, down the Jackson Road toward Strawberry. And you know what they done? Stacy, little man, and I kept our eyes upon the fire, but Christopher John piped eagerly, what? I poked Christopher John, and he turned guiltily around. But TJ, triumphant, with an assured audience of one, settled back in his chair, ready to prolong the suspense. You know, Mom'd kill me if she knowed I was telling this. I heard her and Ms. Claire Thompson talking about it. They was real scared. Don't know why, though. Them old nightmen sure wouldn't scare me none, like I told Claude. Hey, y'all, Stacy said, standing and motioning us up. Mama said she wanted us to take some milk and butter down to Ms. Jackson before noon. We'd better get started. I nodded, and Christopher John, little man, and I got up. Tarred and feathered him, TJ announced hastily. Poured the blackest tar they could find all over him, then plastered him with chicken feathers. TJ laughed. Can you imagine that? But why? Asked little man, forgetting our ploy. This time, TJ did not slow down. I don't know if y'all's little ears should hear this, but it seems to me Mr. Jim Lee Barnett a liar. Oh, he called Mr. Jim Lee Barnett a liar. That name's going to come up. Barnett is kind of a prominent white man in Strawberry. I think he's in Strawberry. It tells us right after that. He's the man who runs the Mercantile down in Strawberry. So Mercantile is like the town store. Mr. Tatum's supposed to done told him that he ain't ordered up all them things Mr. Barnett done charged him for. Mr. Barnett said he had all them things Mr. Tatum ordered writ down, and when Mr. Tatum asked to see that list of his, Mr. Barnett says, "You calling me a liar, boy?" And Mr. Tatum says, "Yes, sir, I guess I is." That done it. So think about this situation. This is an adult man, but he's black, in the South, going to the store to purchase things. Mr. Barnett owns the store. He charged him for all of these things, but Mr. Tatum is saying he doesn't have all those things and that it doesn't match. Okay, you don't want to pay too much money and not have the supplies that you needed, right? And when Mr. Barnett says, "You call me a liar, boy," so he's calling this adult man boy, pretty condescending. And because he's a black man, you know, and he gives the "yes, sir," but he shouldn't, he's kind of out of his place at that time to do that, even though he's in his right. Now, this is, you might never have heard of these things before, but I remember when I was a kid, before some of these movies were banned, when they would talk about tarring and feathering, or some of the Looney Tune cartoons would have some of those things too, where somebody would be tarred and feathered. I always thought it was a joke, not knowing that these things really happened to people. Could you imagine tar? Like, we live in the country. Many of us, our roads, my road is a tar and gravel road. They go down the road with this black tar, and it's very, very sticky. Sometimes it gets stuck on my shoes. It gets stuck on my car. It's almost impossible to get off. Can you imagine your whole body being covered in that tar? And it's very sticky. They put the gravel down on the road afterwards. And then as we drive over it, it pushes the gravel down into the tar and kind of packs it down and makes it into a road. They throw feathers onto the person. They're stuck there. It's very difficult to get that off, and it's not safe. Because he called him a liar. Then it wasn't because of the bus? Christopher John blurted out. Remember, the children are distraught because they think the nightmen were after them. They think it was because of the bus. But what was it really? It was this other man. It was this little story that TJ is telling us. Bus? What's a bus got to do with it? Nothing, said Stacy quickly. Nothing at all. Well, if anybody said them nightmen was down in here because of some stupid bus, they crazy, said TJ authoritatively, because my information come direct from Ms. Claire Thompson, who's seen Mr. Tatum herself. You sure? Stacy asked. Sure, I'm sure. When do I ever say anything when I ain't sure? Stacy smiled with relief. Come on, let's get the milk. All of us went into the kitchen, then to the bedrooms to get our coats. When we got outside, TJ remembered that he had left his cap by the fire and ran back to retrieve it. As soon as we were alone, little man asked, Stacy, you really think them nightmen put tar and feathers all over Mr. Tatum? I suppose so, said Stacy. Little man frowned, but it was Christopher John who spoke, whispering shrilly as if a stray morning ghost might overhear. If they ever find out about the bus, you think they're going to put tar and feathers all over us? Little man's frown deepened, and he observed gravely, if they did, we'd never get clean again. Think about who just said that. Little man, right? Likes to be so clean, we'd never get clean again. Cassie, said Christopher John, his eyes wide. Well, was you real scared when you seen him? Little man shivered with excitement. I wish I could have seen him. Well, I don't, declared Christopher John. In fact, I wish I'd never heard of no nightmen or buses or secrets or holes in the road. And with that outburst, he stuffed his pudgy hands into his thin jacket, pressed his lips firmly together, and refused to say another word. After a few moments, Stacy said, What's keeping TJ? The rest of us shrugged, then followed Stacy back up the porch into Mama's room. As we entered, TJ jumped. He was standing at the desk with Mama's W.E.B. Du Bois, the Negro, in his hands. "That don't look like your cap," said Stacy. "Aw, man, I ain't done nothing. Just looking at Ms. Logan's history book, that's all. I'm mighty interested in that place called Egypt she'd been telling us about and them black kings that was ruling back then." Still talking, he casually put down the book and picked up his cap. All four of us looked accusingly at TJ, and he halted. "Say, what is this? What's the meaning of sneaking up on me like that anyway? Y'all think I was looking for them test questions or something? Shoot, a fellow'd think you didn't trust him." Then, thrusting his arm around Stacy's shoulder, he chided. "Friends gotta trust each other, Stacy, 'cause ain't nothing like a true friend." And with those words of wisdom, he left the room, leaving us to wonder how he had managed to slink out of this one. I forgot to notice at what point I was starting this video. So since there's a break here, I'm going to pause, and that'll be the end of our first lesson for chapter 4.